The boardroom fell silent as I delivered the news that would shatter two lives forever. But let me take you back to where this delicious revenge story truly began. The words still echo in my mind like a death sentence I never saw coming. You are great, Tessa, but I have found someone who just fits better. Those 12 words from Caleb's mouth felt like 1,000 knives piercing through 3 years of shared dreams, late-night conversations, and a future I thought we were building together. I stood there in our shared apartment, surrounded by memories we had created, watching the man I loved pack his belongings into cardboard boxes with the same casual indifference he might use to discard yesterday's newspaper. No trembling hands. No tears. No emotion whatsoever. Just cold, calculated, corporate-like closure that left me questioning everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the person I had given my entire heart to. The better fit he spoke of was not some mysterious woman I had never encountered. No, fate would not be that merciful. Her name was Riley, and I had met her exactly once at a networking event 6 months prior. She was everything I was not. Blonde hair that caught light like spun gold, a laugh that could fill entire rooms and demand attention from every corner, and a vocabulary peppered with words like manifest, girl boss, and authentic energy, every 3 sentences as if these phrases held some magical power to transform reality. I remembered that single encounter with crystal clarity now. She had approached me with a confidence that bordered on arrogance, looked me up and down with calculating eyes, and then winked at me like I was some pathetic joke she found mildly amusing. At the time, I had dismissed it as typical influencer behavior. Performative, shallow, meaningless. I never imagined that wink would haunt me for months to come, that it was actually her way of marking territory she had already decided to claim. Caleb called her his muse, with a reverence in his voice I had never heard him use when speaking about me. His muse. As if I had been nothing more than a placeholder, a rough draft he had finally decided to replace with his masterpiece. His digital media agency was experiencing unprecedented growth, creating content for influencers, TikTokers, and wannabe entrepreneurs who threw money at anyone promising to make them internet famous. Riley gets it, he had explained to me during one of our final conversations, his eyes lighting up in ways that made my stomach turn. She understands the vision. Apparently, I did not. While they were busy filming beach vlogs that showcased their authentic love story, eating sushi with their bare hands like children playing at being adults, and posting motivational quotes over sunset photographs, I was quietly, methodically, determinedly finishing my MBA. Every single night after working my full-time job, I would sit at my kitchen table with textbooks spread before me like battle plans, absorbing knowledge that would become my weapons. While they were building their brand on surface-level content and borrowed wisdom, I was building something real, something substantial, something that would last longer than whatever algorithm was trending that week. The freelance work I took on during this period was not just about paying bills. It was about proving to myself that I had value beyond what Caleb had seen in me. Every project I completed, every client who expressed satisfaction with my work, every small victory became a building block in the foundation of who I was becoming. I was no longer just Tessa, the woman who had been deemed not quite right by someone she loved. I was becoming Tessa, the professional who could deliver results that mattered. By the time they launched, Riley and Caleb Company, with their pastel logos that looked like they had been designed by someone who had never seen actual branding before, and their overpriced hoodies that featured motivational quotes in fonts that made graphic designers weep, I had secured 3 successful clients, and was building a growing list of investors who believed in my vision for the future of digital media. The irony was not lost on me that while they were playing at being entrepreneurs, posting behind-the-scenes content of their journey, and selling courses on how to build your dream business, I was actually building a dream business. Every late night I spent working was an investment in a future they could not even imagine. Every sacrifice I made was a step toward a destination that would make their accomplishments look like child's play. Fast forward 2 years. 2 years of grinding, learning, growing, and becoming someone I had never imagined I could be. I walked into a newly acquired satellite office in Los Angeles, not as someone's girlfriend or ex-girlfriend, but as the vice president of content strategy at a major media conglomerate. The title felt powerful on my tongue, but more importantly, it felt earned. Every letter of those words represented hours of study, months of proving myself, and years of refusing to let someone else's opinion of my worth define my future. The company we had just acquired was struggling. Their revenue had plummeted, their content had become stale and repetitive, and their leadership had made a series of decisions that any business school student could have identified as catastrophic. The brand had tanked when algorithms shifted and their content strategy proved to be built on trends rather than timeless value. Sponsorships had dried up faster than they could find new revenue streams, and their attempts to pivot had only accelerated their decline. That company was Riley and Caleb Company. I walked into my first staff meeting with my notes organized, my objectives clear, and my professional demeanor polished to perfection. The conference room was filled with employees who looked like they were attending their own funeral, their faces reflecting the uncertainty that comes with new ownership and inevitable changes. At the end of the table, in a blazer that hung awkwardly on her frame and clearly did not fit properly, sat Riley. She was holding a coffee cup that probably cost $6. Money she likely could not afford given the company's financial situation. Her hair was still blonde, but it lacked the lustrous quality I remembered. Her skin looked tired, and her eyes held a weariness that no amount of concealer could hide. This was not the confident influencer who had winked at me 2 years ago. This was someone who had been forced to confront the difference between playing business and actually running one. When our eyes met, hers widened with a recognition that sent visible shock through her entire system. The color drained from her face, so quickly I worried she might faint right there in the conference room. Her hands began to tremble slightly, causing tiny ripples in her overpriced coffee, and I could see her mind racing as she tried to process the impossible situation she found herself in. Caleb was notably absent. I had heard through industry connections that he had abandoned ship 2 weeks prior, claiming he was moving into consulting, which everyone in the business world knew was code for I failed spectacularly and am now trying to rebrand that failure as intentional. He had left Riley to face the consequences of their shared decisions alone, a betrayal that probably stung worse than anything I had experienced. I smiled, not cruelly but professionally, placed my notes on the table with deliberate precision, and said the words that would change everything. Let us begin. The meeting proceeded exactly as I had planned. I outlined our new content strategy, explained the changes that would be implemented immediately, and detailed the performance metrics that would determine who would remain with the company moving forward. Every word was calculated, every pause intentional, every glance designed to communicate competence and authority. 10 minutes into my presentation, Riley raised her hand with the tentative gesture of someone who knew they were drowning, but was not sure if asking for help would save them or pull them under faster. I actually do not think I am the right fit for this environment, she mumbled, her voice barely audible above the hum of the air conditioning. The words seemed to catch in her throat, as if she could not quite believe she was saying them. Without another word, without eye contact, without any of the dramatic flair that had once defined her online persona, she stood up. Her chair made a soft scraping sound against the floor that seemed impossibly loud in the suddenly silent room. She gathered her things with shaking hands, walked toward the door with measured steps that suggested she was using every ounce of her remaining dignity to avoid running, and left. The silence that followed was deafening. 23 pairs of eyes stared at me, waiting to see how I would respond to this unprecedented situation. I took a breath, made a note on my pad, and continued with my presentation as if nothing had happened. That reaction, calm, professional, unshakable, sent a message to every remaining employee about the kind of leader they were now working for. That afternoon, as I was reviewing financial reports in my new office, my phone buzzed with a text message. The name on the screen made my heart skip a beat, though not in the way it once had. Caleb had somehow obtained my number and had the audacity to reach out. Tessa, just heard you are the new VP. Wow. Maybe we could catch up sometime. I stared at that message for a long time, imagining all the responses I could send. I could ignore him completely. I could send a professional response that maintained boundaries. I could unleash years of accumulated hurt and anger in a text that would leave him as devastated as his words had left me. Instead, I did something better. I did not reply at all. But I did compose a company-wide memo that went out the next morning, announcing our new leadership direction. The subject line read, Strategic Restructuring and Cultural Evolution. But the message was clear to anyone who knew how to read between corporate lines. Effective immediately, our organization will be implementing a zero-tolerance policy for underperformance, lack of accountability, and failure to adapt to industry standards. We have no room for fragile egos, failed visions, or individuals who mistake temporary trends for sustainable business strategies. Our commitment is to excellence, innovation, and results that speak louder than empty promises. Every word was carefully chosen. Every phrase was designed to communicate strength without appearing personal. It was a masterclass in professional passive aggression, and I was proud of every syllable. The response was immediate and exactly what I had hoped for. Employees who had been coasting on the previous leadership's lackadaisical standards either stepped up dramatically or found themselves naturally selecting out of the organization. Productivity increased by 40% in the first month. Client satisfaction scores reached all-time highs. Revenue began climbing for the first time in over a year. But the real satisfaction came from knowing that Caleb would read that memo and understand exactly who it was directed toward. He had wanted a muse. Someone to inspire him without challenging him. Someone to make him feel creative without pushing him to grow. Instead, he got to watch from the sidelines as I became something far more powerful than a muse. I became the movement itself. He had picked his dream girl, chosen her over someone who would have built an empire alongside him. Instead, I built that empire anyway, and then I became her boss. The woman he had selected as my replacement could not even remain in the same room as me for more than 10 minutes before fleeing in defeat. The weeks that followed were a blur of strategic meetings, personnel changes, and systematic improvements that transformed the company from a failing vanity project into a legitimate media powerhouse. I implemented training programs that actually taught employees valuable skills instead of just motivational catchphrases. I restructured client relationships to focus on long-term value rather than quick cash grabs. I brought in industry experts who could provide insights based on real experience rather than social media popularity. 3 months after the acquisition, we had not only stopped the company's financial hemorrhaging, but had actually begun generating profit. 6 months later, we were being featured in industry publications as a case study in successful corporate turnaround. A year later, I was invited to speak at conferences about leadership, strategic thinking, and the importance of substance over style in business development. During this entire period, I occasionally heard updates about Riley and Caleb through the strange network of connections that exists in every industry. Riley had attempted to launch a personal brand focused on authentic entrepreneurship and learning from failure. But her audience had apparently grown tired of her content. Her follower count was steadily declining, brand partnerships were non-existent, and her attempts to position herself as a business consultant were met with skepticism from anyone who had actually researched her track record. Caleb's consulting venture had lasted approximately 4 months before he was forced to take a traditional employment position at a mid-level marketing firm. His social media presence, once filled with confident proclamations about disrupting industries and building the future, had become sporadic and noticeably less boastful. The man who had once called himself a visionary was now creating content calendars for small businesses and managing social media accounts for local restaurants. But I had not achieved this success for revenge, though I would be lying if I said the irony was not deeply satisfying. I had achieved it because being discarded by someone I loved had forced me to discover strength I never knew I possessed. It had pushed me to stop seeking validation from others and start building something that would validate itself through results. The woman who had been told she was not quite the right fit had become someone who determined who fit and who did not. The woman who had been replaced had become irreplaceable. The woman who had been deemed insufficient had become more than sufficient. She had become essential. On the 2-year anniversary of the acquisition, I received an invitation to speak at a digital media conference in Las Vegas. The topic was From Setback to Comeback, Building Resilience in Leadership. As I prepared my presentation, I realized that my story was not really about revenge or proving someone wrong. It was about discovering that the end of one chapter could be the beginning of something far more magnificent than anything I had previously imagined. Standing on that stage, Looking out at an audience of entrepreneurs, executives, and industry leaders who had come to hear what I had learned, I understood that the greatest revenge is not making someone pay for hurting you. The greatest revenge is becoming so successful that their opinion of you becomes completely irrelevant. I had not just recovered from being dumped. I had not just survived having my heart broken by someone I trusted. I had transformed that pain into fuel for a journey that had taken me further than I ever dreamed possible. The woman who had once questioned her worth based on someone else's preference had become someone whose worth was measured by her own achievements. As I concluded my presentation and walked off that stage to thunderous applause, I realized that Caleb had actually done me the greatest favor of my life. By leaving me, he had forced me to find myself. By choosing someone else, he had pushed me to become someone I never would have discovered if I had remained comfortable in a relationship that was limiting my potential. I never did respond to his text message. I never needed to. My success was the only response required, and it spoke louder than any words ever could. The girl he had replaced me with had quit the same day I walked into that conference room. The business they had built together had crumbled under the weight of its own superficiality. The future they had planned had dissolved when reality proved their dreams were built on foundation that could not support actual growth. Meanwhile, I had built something real, something lasting, something that would continue growing long after their 15 minutes of internet fame had been forgotten. I had become the boss, the leader, the decision-maker who determined direction rather than simply following it. He had wanted a muse who would inspire him without challenging him. Instead, he got to watch someone he had discarded become the inspiration for countless others who had been told they were not enough. I became living proof that sometimes the person who leaves you is actually doing you the favor of clearing the path for something better. The greatest victory was not that I had become successful despite his rejection. The greatest victory was that I had become successful because of it. His inability to see my value had forced me to discover it for myself, and that discovery had led to achievements that neither of us could have imagined when we were together. I had not just proven him wrong. I had made his opinion irrelevant. And in a world where so many people spend their lives seeking validation from those who hurt them, irrelevance is the ultimate triumph. The dream girl he had chosen over me could not even remain in the same room once I held the power. The muse he had selected had been silenced by the movement I had become. The woman he had deemed a better fit had discovered that when real success entered the room, she no longer fit anywhere at all. And me? I had learned that sometimes the greatest gift someone can give you is showing you that you never needed them in the first place. If this story of transformation and triumph resonated with you, please subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories of resilience, revenge, and remarkable comebacks. Your support helps us share these powerful narratives that remind us all that our setbacks can become our greatest setups for success. Hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments below about a time when someone's rejection became your redirection towards something amazing.